Hello and welcome to the Badass Fertility Podcast. I am your host, Catherine Bregman. I am a fertility mindset coach who helps women around the world become the moms they are meant to be. Having spent numerous years trying to conceive my baby girl, I know the heartache, fear, and grief that comes with this experience. And I know that women who succeed on this journey discover how to use their mind as an asset rather than a block to making their baby dreams come true. If you are ready to remove the blocks between you and your baby and learn how to live this journey with confidence, clarity, and calm, then you're in the right place. So let's get started. Okay, so today's topic is why you are the most qualified leader of your bump squad. What? Okay, so you might already be thinking, how am I the most qualified leader of my bump squad? I don't know shit about having a baby other than, the actual act of it. Beyond that, what do I know? So what we're going to talk about today is this really true aspect of human nature, right? Which is that when we want something really badly, it's absolutely 100% human to seek out experts and follow their advice. I mean, that is why we have experts, right? Because they specialize in a particular field. They give us advice from that field. We follow that advice, and oftentimes we see the results we're seeking. But sometimes, especially on this journey, we take that idea a little too far and we start doing things that don't even feel right. We make decisions from a place not of informed and balanced perspective, which is really what an expert, quote unquote, should provide you with, but rather we begin to make decisions from this place of fear, lack, and honestly, even panic, right? So can you relate to this? I mean, I know this describes me and the women who come into my Badass Fertility program to a T. So today we're really going to talk about this tendency to defer our best thinking to quote unquote experts and how, interestingly enough, that could actually be blocking your success. All right, so I'm going to give you a little story about my own journey to kind of illustrate this point, right? So after 1 year of trying and one miscarriage, I started seeing an acupuncturist weekly and then twice a week. And after a year of working with her, love her, she's amazing. I'm a big fan of acupuncture. If you're curious about it, check out some previous episodes. Side note, where I talk with Catherine Hollingsworth, an amazing acupuncturist who talks about the amazing things it can do for fertility. And, for many, many women, it's not the only tool in their kit, right? We need more than one approach. So this acupuncturist, who I love, recommended that I see a reproductive endocrinologist. And for those of us who aren't sure, that's basically an IUI, IVF doctor, right? So he came highly recommended by her. And I want to really start this conversation by saying, despite what I'm going to say in a minute, I really loved my IVF doctor. Okay. So this is not an indictment against him or reproductive endocrinology in general. I would say about half of the women who complete my Badass Fertility program are using IVF, and many, many, many of them become pregnant, and it is a miracle, right? It's a tool, right? We are all about the tools. So it's a tool. But so again, this doctor spent a lot of time with my husband and me. We would go in there, have conversations. He would listen for up to an hour. So one side note, again, about being the leader of your bump squad is you've got to find people who will listen to you and respect you. And you have to develop the confidence to ask the questions that need to be asked, right? So it's a two-way street. You've got to bring your A game, and you've got to find someone who is going to respect it. So All right. So that said, I, again, just, saying the accolades of my IVF doctor. At one point, one of the women in my program actually went to this same clinic. She became pregnant through them. So I love them. I think I've made that clear, right? So all of that said, I also want to explore what I am calling today the medical messiah complex. Okay. We have this sort of like obsession / fascination with the medical field in general, and definitely when it comes to making our mama dreams come true. So on the one hand, I totally get it, right? Reproductive endocrinologists spend over a decade. They spend 11 years, right, becoming qualified to practice. They are experts on what they do. And we are novices, right? We just want to have a freaking baby. So naturally, we're inclined to do or try whatever they say. And at the same time, we also have developed this tendency to believe their opinions, sometimes against our own better instincts. So funny story, my IVF doctor actually had a mug that said, quote, "Please don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree." And it really made me laugh. And I felt for him. Like, I really felt for the guy, because I cannot imagine how frustrating it must be to have spent so much time, right, becoming an expert in the medical field, only to have people with, like, and all due respect, but who just do these Google searches, come up with questions, and then start wanting to challenge, right? Or get engaged in debates about things that they have spent maybe an hour on, what have you. So I totally get it. I understand where he's coming from, right? And I honestly thought the mug was funny. At the same time, it's also patronizing and symptomatic of an overall perception that a medical degree makes you an expert on reproduction. So let's get this clear right now. A medical degree makes you an expert in your field of reproductive endocrinology. It doesn't make you an expert on reproduction. Okay? Because as we know, like, reproduction is so much bigger and so much broader than any one field can possibly encompass. And if you are on this journey and you've been doing whatever Western medicine tells you to do and it's not happening, I know you know what I'm saying, right? Reproduction is not just the body, it's the mind. And dare I say, it even includes the spirit, right? So going back to this idea of the Western medicine perspective, it's like that old saying, if you go to a surgeon with a problem and ask them how to solve it, what are they going to say? They're going to say, have surgery, right? And now I'm not hating on surgeons for saying that. And I'm not suggesting that that's all they ever do, right? Because that's not true. There are plenty of IVF doctors or surgeons who say, try a different route or what have you. But in general, right? What I'm illustrating is that when you become an expert in a particular field, you begin to see that field as the best solution to the problem in front of you. And you can't even help it because you're literally trained to see every problem in front of you through the lens of your field, right? So of course, the things you've been trained to see are the things you're going to see. And that is why it's awesome to get their input. And it is also why it is essential you do not place their opinions above what feels right for you. You could go to an IVF doctor who says 42 is too old. I'll show you 5 women who got pregnant naturally at 42, right? Find a doctor who believes in you. That is part of being the leader of your bump squad. Now, as you can tell, I am so passionate about this because it is this practice. It is the stepping up and becoming the leader of one's bump squad that I have seen make the difference for women who are struggling to conceive again and again and again. And the first time I saw it happen was with myself. So when I went to this amazing IVF doctor, who I love and would recommend to other people, right? I had this idea for how to treat my endometriosis, and it was outside the box. And this very kind, extremely intelligent, patient doctor who always listened and made me feel respected. He basically laughed in my face in the most polite way possible, right? So he literally said that the people who do this procedure were a scam and they were just trying to take my money. Now, bear in mind, that procedure cost like maybe 1/8 of what IVF costs. So, okay, just for the record. He also said there was no mainstream medical evidence to verify its effectiveness, i.e., it hadn't been written up in medical journals. So again, that's fine. I mean, medical journals are amazing. They provide evidence. I consult medical journals when I'm looking for research on, all kinds of things related to fertility. I think they're amazing sources of knowledge. And just because something hasn't been written up in a medical journal doesn't mean it's not effective or worth giving a try, right? So the procedure I'm talking about is something called WURN. It's WURN. And as a caveat, I am not encouraging you to do it. I am not endorsing it. I'm not connected to it in any way, shape, or form. I'm just telling you that's what it was called, right? So it treats endometriosis externally. Right now, the only medical option to treat endometriosis is surgery, and that can be beneficial, but it can also be, or it is, very invasive, and it can come with negative side effects of its own, right? So I'm weighing in my mind, okay, surgery versus external, really like hardcore intensive massage on the abdomen. So, okay, I was drawn to WURN. So interestingly, I came across this article talking about this method on 2 separate occasions. The first time I came across it, I was like totally drawn to it. And I want you, as I'm talking about this, ask yourself, have you had this experience? Have you found something that you were drawn to just upon discovering it, just upon feeling like, that feels right, right? Because it just felt right to me. But even though it felt right, and I thought about it a lot, I didn't pursue it because I decided it was too much money, right? Since I had already chosen to do IVF, and it felt like IVF was a quote, safer choice because it's written up in medical journals, because it's what people do. And I basically subsumed my own instinct to the logic and rationality that I felt should be the thing I was consulting in order to make my choices, right? I wrote it off as frivolous and too much. I moved on. I did 2 rounds of egg retrievals, had no success, right? At some point, I found myself Googling again, right? As we all know, Google is real, and came across this same article. So this time I had already started working on my mindset. I had already become cognizant of the tools that I had at my disposal that I wasn't using. I was learning to trust my gut rather than write it off as frivolous. So by working on my mindset, which is the same tools that I teach the ladies in my program and I practice every day myself, I was learning how to become an advocate for myself instead of playing small, how to ask all of my questions, i.e., be the leader of my bump squad, not a complicit follower, how to avoid the scarcity mentality when it came to spending money to make my dream come true. So I remember going back to the point of this story, right? I brought up this procedure with my IVF doctor at the time, and he very politely laughed in my face. And I remember walking out of that meeting and looking over at my husband and saying, I don't care what he thinks. I'm doing this physical therapy. And that led me to Susan Winograd, who is an expert on the pelvic floor. And she actually has a podcast called Pelvicor, and she will be a guest on our podcast coming in a couple of weeks. So she and I met for 5 days straight for about 5 or 6 hours. She did this procedure. I mean, it is intense, right? It was no joke, right? We not only released tissues, but just as importantly, emotion can become lodged in our bodies and hide within tissues and cells, right? And what happens oftentimes for women who've experienced childhood trauma or other things like that, these can actually become blocks to conception. And so it may show up on a physical level, i.e. as endometriosis. But in my case, as I know with a lot of other women, it was a complex situation that required release on many levels. We'll call it the psychic emotional level, right? And so through that process of release, I became reconnected with the pelvic floor. Okay, so it was an amazing, amazing thing. And here's the kicker. I got pregnant the very next cycle. Okay. And so this is not a coincidence. It was the linchpin in this pregnancy. And I will tell you what, every woman I have worked with has a moment like this, where they utilize the tools that they have learned in the Badass Fertility Program and they apply them to their experiences in a new way. And that results in new outcomes, right? So this was the result of a long line of subtle but significant changes made to my thinking, which changed my actions and led to new results. So if I hadn't been working on my mindset leading up to that, I really don't think I ever would have done it. I don't think I would have gained that confidence to pursue my gut over the sort of rational logic of my doctors. And that is why I am so passionate about this issue of bringing out your inner badass in order to bring home your baby. And when I say that, I really want to drive home, this is so much more than just thinking positive and having positive things happen. Okay. That's not what I'm talking about here. Yes, thinking positive is great, but it's a lot more than that. So keep in mind, the universe will support you when you begin working with it rather than trying to control everything around yourself. When you respond to the signs and the instincts that you're getting, right? The intuitive hits that you're receiving, you will find that you start to move along a very different path, one little step at a time, one small step at a time. So what can we learn from all of this today? So remember at the beginning, I mentioned we have to get over this medical messiah complex when it comes to the medical field. We want to utilize the support of our doctors as one form of knowledge on this journey. And we have to start noticing the other forms of knowledge that we often ignore and which comes in the form of our gut, right? It's something that feels right when we come across it. It's something that we can't really stop thinking about, even though our rational mind keeps telling us it's superfluous or indulgent or, not researched, so I shouldn't do it. I am a fertility coach because I know that if I hadn't been working on my own mindset, I never would have made the choices that led me to my daughter. As a woman struggling to conceive, we are inundated with advice from every single corner of, our world, right? And it's like, how do I know how to process and filter all of this? How do I know how to make the choice that's going to be right for me? And how do you possibly stay calm when it feels like the clock is ticking and you have to act now, or you're never going to find your dream baby, right? It's this horrible, horrible state to live in. And the Badass Fertility Program that I developed provides the women who join it with the tools to filter and find the exact right approach for themselves. Scarcity, fear, grief, self-loathing do not lead you to your baby. Bringing out your inner badass is the key to bringing your beautiful baby home. If you want to learn more about how to access this inner badass to become the mom you're meant to be, check today's show notes for a special little tips sheet that I'm including free with today's episode. And if you want to learn more about how to work with me, go to badassfertility.com. And most importantly, know this. Whatever you are feeling, whatever you are going through, if you made it to the end of this podcast, you are meant to be a mom because you care enough to show up and listen. If you like what you heard today, please follow Badass Fertility and tune in each week. You can tune in weekly on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your shows.